Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. This podcast explores how authors create a world that we can escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that keeps us turning the page. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I loved your book, Building Material.
Thank you.
It was fantastic. Your memoir focuses on your life as a doorman for an exclusive Park Avenue building in New York City.
Right.
You've been a doorman for the past 20 years, of which 14 has been at your current spot.
Right.
I loved your book. You're a great writer with a knack for metaphors and dialogue with a great story, a real hero's journey.
Thank you.
Let's start off with your reading from your prologue and a bit from that first chapter, Summer Guy.
Sure.
I have to say, you have so many sections that I wanted you to read aloud, but it will probably be best for people just to buy your book or listen to you narrate it on Audible. So go ahead.
When the old lady stepped in front of the building, I knew she'd be trouble. I wasn't afraid of her coming into the lobby. I had locked the front door the last time I stepped inside. Of course I'd lock the door. Always keep the door locked was the first thing I had learned at the building. Just like it was the first thing I learned at the last building, the one where I'd received my start as a doorman. Once the front door of a Park Avenue building is locked, it's closed on you with conviction. You'll need a chainsaw and a clear schedule to get inside. I wasn't worried about the old lady trespassing into the building. She wasn't impressed by the mammoth pre-war residents before her anyway. She was too busy rocking back and forth and wailing beneath the front door's canopy. It was a warm summer day, and she'd gotten comfortable in the shade. A hard hat walked past, and she quieted herself. Pulling up beside him, she moaned and peered into his eyes pleadingly. Then, as if realizing she hadn't done enough, she raised a shard of cardboard up to her nose. The sign and the words are too small, and the way she moved, like a buoy in a storm, wasn't conducive to reading. She couldn't speak English and hoped the sign did the talking for her. But she wasn't doing herself any favors. Keeping it raised at her nose made her look like a stranger outside your window. Every pedestrian walked past the old lady without acknowledging her pleas for help. Hers was a plight for the ages. This lady doesn't know what she's doing, I concluded. She could have learned a thing or two from Junior, a seasoned panhandler in the neighborhood. He passed by the front entrance every morning and waved at us, shouting, "Started my shift." I always laughed because it was the start of my shift too. So it was like we worked together, though in different departments. While I stood on my feet inside the building, Junior sat at the corner with a giant cardboard sign that had enough space for two requests, one for money and another for a blessing. Holding that sign, Junior made himself a couple $100 every shift and would later tell me about it with a smile. The operative word is corner. Junior panhandled at the corner, never in front of the building. The lady was doing it all wrong. You can't panhandle in front of a Park Avenue building. Everybody knows that. She'd been in front of the building for 10 minutes, an eternity's worth of loitering by Park Avenue standards. Like I said, she wasn't a threat to building security, but she had to go. It wasn't her. It was the sight of her, her look. The pained eyes, the black headscarf knotted beneath her chin, quivering lips that plunged at the corners, the hunched resolve to stay under the canopy. I cringed at the thought of the residents seeing any of that. And that's what happens, you know. After a while, you start thinking for the residents. You consider their needs and defend their sensibilities. The old lady couldn't possibly know that, of course, but it didn't matter. Part of the job is shielding tenants from ugliness and sorrow they haven't bought into. I turned around to see what George, my shift partner, was doing. My eyes landed on his sweeping white mustache. George was deep in the mailroom, his short arms lurching forward with every envelope and magazine that he plunged into a mail slot. It was my least favorite part of the shift, the hour I covered the passenger elevator and the front door while George sorted the mail. Always around 11 in the morning and right before lunch so I can earn my meal in full. Sometimes he lost himself flipping through the tennis magazines, and then that's when it would happen. The building would swamp me with deliveries, calls from residents, and rides on the elevator, and all at the same time. The old lady in front of the building was already the biggest curveball, but then she caught sight of an oncoming businesswoman. The suit and leather briefcase must have signaled to her to work harder because she raised the sign past her nose until it covered her eyes. The businesswoman rumbled past the old lady, whose cardboard face pivoted along with her. Nothing. No dollars or cents from the businesswoman. A stampede of tourists rolled past. None of them spared any change. I heard the old lady's cries from behind the cardboard as the barrage of chunky cameras and hiking backpacks marched past her on all sides. None of them stopped to read the sign. I come USA from Venezuela. Children in Queens, please help. I let out a long sigh. The old lady had become a situation. She was no junior whom I tossed from the front door in a second flat. The old lady from Venezuela was different. She had come here to survive, not to live, and was barely succeeding at the former. I watched as she lowered the cardboard sign in front of a man in dark sunglasses and read her words aloud for him. He wore a fleece vest with his firm's logo embroidered on the chest. You never saw a finance bro with a faster sidestep. My heart plummeted for her. Building protocol started filing through my mind. Wait 4 rings before picking up the building phone. Always say Mr. or Miss or Mrs., except with Mr. O'Leary, who says we should call him Ben. But call him Mr. O'Leary anyway because you're his doorman, not his friend. Never compliment the ladies on their appearance. Always compliment Mrs. Lockman on her appearance. She's widowed, for Christ's sake. Keep the sidewalk in front of the door clear of everything and everyone. The old lady couldn't know the narrow strip of sidewalk extending from the front door to the street, all of it shaded by the green canopy, was sacred. It's the first thing residents see when they walk through the door I opened for them. It's their launching pad. I sympathized. She was an old lady crying, and it was my job to make her disappear.
Great. Thank you. And then can you do a little bit from that we talked about from Summer Guy, the very first chapter, I guess?
Sure. The job would have been harder to leave if not for one of its core values. Don't get close. I learned all about it on my first day at the building, and it made me feel the chill of adulthood. I was ridiculously early to my first shift at 905 Park Avenue. I had wanted to make a good impression on my first day, so I ironed my clothes the night before. I also set an alarm to wake up, another alarm reminding me to start getting dressed, and another to leave the apartment. I lived in Kingsbridge Heights, after all, and that's not a stone's throw. I didn't expect the train to be rumbling into the train station when I arrived at the platform. It was the Downtown Express, and it got me to the Upper East Side an hour early. After getting dressed, I stood in the basement's locker room with my suit jacket draped over a chair and thought, well, damn, what do I do now? I had more downtime than I could handle. The locker room silenced. It was a brushed, vapid sound of nothingness, and it was swirling all around me. You should have seen the lockers. They appeared to me like an assembly of coffins looking down on me. I couldn't take it anymore. I rose to my feet and walked out of the locker room. I was 22 years old. I was there for paychecks, not to think about my mortality. I walked out to find someone to talk to. Luckily, a few of the building's men had gathered in the clearing where all the basement's hallways converged. Louise wasted no time in making me feel at home. Your first shift, huh? He asked, removing his jacket. He was a middle-aged Puerto Rican and one of those building veterans who took many liberties, like leaving his post before he was relieved from it, which was exactly what he'd just done. You nervous? He asked. I was Louise's relief. He must have heard I was in the building an hour early and expected it to translate into his leaving before the official end of his shift. When it didn't happen, he'd walked off the lobby floor. It was a veteran move, one I wouldn't imagine attempting as the new guy. Mr. Evans was in the ring. So was Luca the handyman and 2 porters, more commonly known as maintenance men to the rest of the world. I worried the most about Mr. Evans. He'd been friendly during the interview, but hadn't acknowledged me when I walked into the circle, not even with a nod or a hello. It felt like a test, like I wasn't worthy of the building's clip-on bow tie yet. I got anxious, and my mind scrambled. I had to prove that I belonged there and that I was the right man for the job. I thought back to things I'd said immediately after being hired and picked a line I was certain would resonate. "I'm a friendly guy," I started, "and I'm eager to show it." I smiled, showed all my teeth, too. I heard the words leave my mouth. The first thing I thought was, that sounded really stupid. My response, if it could be called that, had not answered Louise's question. "You nervous?" In the slightest. It had missed the mark completely. First, his question was of the yes or no variety. It wasn't a fill-in-the-blank question with room for self-expression. Then there's my tone. I had responded with a bluster of mistimed, uninformed eagerness. These men had families, funerals to attend, and driveways. Their words carried the weight of experience and sounded full and heavy as a result. Everything I said sounded like a pack of Skittles spilling on the floor. I looked to the men to convince me otherwise. At first, no one said anything. Louise took a breath through his nose and nodded his head slowly, as if trying to believe he'd heard me say something else. Luca raised his eyebrows in disbelief and shook his head as the porter shuffled uneasily. Mr. Evans, who was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, sighed and nodded at Luca, who stood beside him with his fists at his waist like a failed superhero. All eyes turned to Luca, and that's when I knew I was about to get schooled. Luca took a step in my direction and into the huddle. There was no confusing who his words would address. I was standing directly across from him. "The residents are not your friends," he began, his deep, guttural voice doing nothing to soften the magnitude of truth. "They don't care about you. To them, you're just another guy working in the building. A new guy. A summer guy, in fact, which is worse. Don't think you were hired to be a friend. You weren't. Don't speak to them unless they speak to you, and even then, don't go thinking you're a friend. You're a doorman, nothing more. Don't get close." I had yet to work my first shift on Park Avenue and had already heard the least motivational speech of my life, had been rejected by residents I'd never met, and had been scolded by a second-in-command I'd never spoken to before. If there's a record for most discouraging first day at a new job, send this page to Guinness. The biggest problem was that everything Lucas said was so obviously true. It was like one of those oft-overlooked items that were once considered innovative, like Ziploc bags or toilet seats. They're items you use often that you can't do without, but now you're staring at them in your hands, wondering how you didn't think of them first. Somehow, as smart as you are, as creative as you've always been, you didn't think of Thousand Island dressing first. You had the ketchup, you had the mayo, but you never thought of mixing the two. That's how I felt. Like a dumbass who should have arrived at Thousand Island sauce. Of course the residents didn't care about me. They were affluent, busy people. Mr. Evans had told me that all about them at the first interview. And they didn't need me for a friend. One reason you don't come to work an hour early is to keep the coworker you're relieving from raising his expectations. You relieve a guy an hour early and it's over. He expects to work 7-hour shifts for the rest of his doorman career. Another reason? So you don't hear someone utter words that strike at your heart and nature. Don't get close to people. Park Avenue was out of its mind. I couldn't help trying to endear myself to people. I don't think I was weird about it, but I've always extended myself in the hopes of making connections with others. Did it always happen? No. It happened often enough, however, that I knew how great it felt to be close to people and hoped to experience it more and more. I was 22 years old when I discovered a superior class of people I wasn't allowed to get close to. The notion felt like a deep violation of my core values, and it dampened my spirits. I was more embarrassed by my ignorance, however. When you get caught with your pants down like I had, you pull them up in a hurry and act like everything's gravy. I worked the hell out of that first week at the building, said hello and smiled and waved at residents like the giant Mickey Mouse patrolling Times Square. all the while reconciling myself with a few ice cold realities. The building didn't want me. It wanted 40 hours a week, and if I played my cards right, there might be a locker in it for me.
Great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So you were 22 when you got this job.
Yeah.
Can you tell us initially about where you grew up, your family, and why getting this job was a particularly lucky break for you?
Sure. I was raised in the Bronx. We were, I guess we might call poor, but my father worked really hard so that we always had food on the table. It was just not like steak every night. My father worked really hard to put the first 4 of his kids in private school. So we had a stellar education all throughout. I was the oldest, so I had it the longest. I went to private school from kindergarten to the 6th grade. And then when the family started getting bigger, he didn't make more money with the family getting bigger. So he pulled us out of private school and put us in public school, where I and my brother Johnny got into gifted programs for gifted students. So magnet schools. We played sports all the time. I was what you might have considered at the time a nerd, but I was definitely also sporty. So I had to do my homework, but then I always got out. The summer, all I did was play sports. So I was well-rounded in that way. Also went to church on Sundays, like 3 days of the week, actually. So I feel like I had a well-rounded upbringing, read a lot. My father, I never really got around to figure out how or why, but he had a wall full of books in the living room, just full, and the classics like Of Mice and Men, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, just lining the wall. So we always had something to read. So I'm super grateful for that life, because it's either all academics or it's all sports or it's all literature. But I had it for one kid, I had it all. I was able to dabble in everything. Eventually I went to high school and, met girls. And I had met girls before, but I wasn't a hit with them, right? Until high school. And that was a big, big deal for our family, because we were raised ultra Orthodox Christian. Like, you had to stick with your people. And I get it. I get it now more than ever, but at the time I didn't really get it, and it caused a stir with my parents, and even my mother, even a couple of months ago, said we went way too far with you. Like, we could just let you do your thing and figure things out on your own, whatever. But my father and my mother went crazy, and I rebelled against them, and at the cost of my academics. Lo and behold, by college, I'm just flailing, I went to a Christian college to kind of appease them, like, hey, I'm going to Christian college, so let me go. Just let me go. Right. I asked them to sign a waiver because I was 17 at the time, so I was not legal. I was not legally allowed to go to college.
You were young.
Right, but I treated college like it was a resort. Like, I was no longer in the Bronx. The first time I'm not living in the Bronx. I'm not under the supervision of my parents. I'm not going to church. I'm all the structure that I'd always had, that I would always fought against, it's all gone. Right. I was an animal, like unleashed. I just on campus, just doing whatever I'd ever imagined. There were things I did that I couldn't even have imagined back then. And by 2.5 years later, I'm on the radar of the school officials, and they finally they went on their own campaign against me. I was the leader of an underground fraternity on campus, and they got me on a a technicality.
Oh, right,
breaking into the cafeteria. But they could have gotten me for worse things than that. And that I could not go home after that. After I was expelled, I just felt ashamed. I didn't want to face my parents, because I knew where I should have been. I did consider myself a brilliant student even then. I was young, but still mature enough to recognize that I was smarter than most kids in high school. Like, I didn't get into I didn't get into Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, or Brooklyn Tech because of my math, but I was still a brilliant student. And when I got kicked out of college, I couldn't face myself. I couldn't face my parents. So I stayed in Nyack, eventually going to Minnesota. And that's where, forget about it. I mean, I just hid, and I allowed myself to think that I could kind of just blend in with all these folks who are happy living out there. I'm not knocking their life, but when you know who you are inside and you try to blend in with people who are completely different, you're lying to yourself. And that's what I was doing out there. Was I was working at a restaurant. I was working at Buffalo Wild Wings and getting huge. I ballooned up to 265 pounds. And I was just living this kind of like nothing life, going to work, coming back home, eating entire plates of casserole, you know. And eventually, I mean, I didn't even know it, but my mother and my brother Jason, who's younger than me, I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and he comes right after me.
Right.
She begging him to get me a job as a doorman. They've already given up on everyone has given up by then on my academic potential. My mother's just thinking, let's get him back to the Bronx. Let's get him a job. A job's gonna fix him. He's gonna be able to pay rent. His trajectory in life will start going up, even if it's not skyrocketing like it was before. But we'll get him back home. He'll get himself straightened out. And Jason's telling her no for months because we had a sibling rivalry growing up. And my father was always comparing Jason to me and Johnny, telling Jason,
right,
why is it that you can't be like Stephen and Johnny in school?
Oh.
Well, by then, school for me was nothing. I was 21, not making any kind of money. My brother Jason is 20, and he's making doorman money at 20, 19, 20. And he's thinking, you know what? How the tables have turned, Like now they're asking me for help after they spent all this time comparing me to Stephen. Well, now they're asking me to help Stephen. I'm not going to do it. So eventually, but I'm in Minnesota. I don't know anything about these conversations. And then,
you're at Buffalo Wings.
Yeah, I'm at Buffalo Wild Wings, going home smelling like teriyaki sauce. Exactly. And eventually, my brother Jason caved, and I'm thankful for that. And my mother reached out to me and said, Stephen, Jason said he's going to put in a good word for you at the job. And will you come in for an interview in April? And I said, all right, sure, whatever. And I did. And they told me I had to cut my hair, cut my goatee, do this and that. And I said, Mom, I'll do it for a summer, but that's it. I'm going right back. But she knew how things would work out. But it was, so to answer the second part of your question, did you ask me, why was it particularly a big break?
Yeah, because, you had kind of fucked up. And so getting this job, it's not easy to get a doorman job.
No, there's no application for it. There's no ad in the paper for it. It's always you got to know somebody. You always have to know somebody. And I knew, or my mother knew my brother. So she was, my mother was essentially my agent, my headhunter.
That's true. And then, so now you've been a doorman for a long time.
20 years.
How long? 20 years?
Yes.
Yeah, a long time. What can you tell us non-doorman people about the job, apart from not getting too close? What are the other main rules about being a doorman, and do you follow them?
I would say it's kind of like, you could consider this as a branch off from don't get close, but don't do too much. Sometimes residents, when they're coming home, they don't need to have a conversation from you, even if you're just being polite and you're not trying to get close. But sometimes they don't want to talk about the Yankees that night or how the loss went. They had a long day at work, and you're just trying to be polite and being a nice guy, whatever. You know the rule, don't get close. But even with the Yankees conversation, you might be doing too much. Sometimes just say hello, grab the bag, help them upstairs because they just want to get to their door. How many times have I live in a four-story walk-up. All I'm doing is from the train station to the 4-block walk home is thinking about the front entrance of my building, how I just want to walk in, even into the lobby, and just feel that a sense of protection, security, home. And I don't want to be stopped by a doorman who wants to talk about the Yankees, So sometimes I think some doormen do too much. You have to pick up on cues from the resident, let them initiate conversation. One other thing is I'll always be ready. I think that half a shift I spend. First of all, the job at least at my current building is pretty easy. I'm fortunate to live in a moderately paced building. It's not fast at all. And so I feel like half of my shift I spend preparing for the rest of the work that's involved in the rest of the half of the shift. And you can't do that if you're kind of like lax or hanging out in the basement, waiting for the elevator to ring. No, you have to be in the lobby at attention, looking at the door, even if you're not the doorman, maybe you're the elevator guy, but you're also helping the guy at the door. So you can't You can't be caught like I was in that chapter, with your pants down, just hanging out, you know. But yeah, you just have to always be ready with your mind
Right.
on being ready.
In terms of, I guess, being of service and not doing too much.
Yeah, and it is
Like
absolutely a service job. It is. I struggle with this even myself. I'm thinking about this as I say it. I know that I struggle with it still, and I try to do better. And I do feel like I have done better. You everything that's going on in your life, you leave it at the front door when you're inside the building, because it is a service job. You do have to say hello with a smile.
Right.
It's not a rule. It's not in the union handbook, but you hope to, because you essentially work where others live. You don't have to get close to them. You don't have to talk about the Yankees, but say hello with a smile. And I remember when I was struggling, that was when I can tell you that I wasn't always providing service with a smile. The chapter with the blooms, where they basically saved my spirit that year.
Right.
I don't know if I can, I don't think that's hyperbole. But I was going to work and just struggling with the idea that I was not a productive human being, that I was not producing anything that reflected my worth as a human. So I was taking that to work and it's like, I'm a doorman. This sucks. I'm better than this. Well, it's a job and it's a good one,
Right.
Now even now I go to work and I'm grateful. I published a book, but it's a good job. So I am working. You've never seen a happier fellow, but back then I was not providing work with a smile. There was another level of growing up and maturing that I had to learn and accomplish before I started going to work and smiling.
Your title, building material.
Yeah.
So you had that broker, I don't know if she was a broker, that Michael, who said, you're a building material. What did she mean then? What do you think she meant? She
just kind of knew. I actually spoke to her on the phone the other day. She saw me at a distance, and she just could sense that not only did I belong, well, this is the most important part of what she sensed was that I belonged in a building, but that I also had experience. As young as I looked, she knew I had experience. So I feel like she viewed me as an asset, like an anomaly, because I was young, super young looking.
Right.
And she wanted me to work in a building, but she also somehow sensed that I had years of experience at buildings already. And I did. 6 years by then. Well, yeah. That's what she meant by it.
I guess, yeah. So you can tell some people just aren't cut out for it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we got two guys at my building are not cut out to be doormen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't last very long?
Well, after a while, when they make the cutoff into the union after 2 years, you have to really build a case to get them fired, and
right.
You have to write them up 3 times and then take that to the union, and then that's how they're fired. But we got one guy who thinks he's a car salesman who's always talking, always wants to talk about the Yankees and stuff like that, and about the weather and cars and coffee. You're just like, dude, shut up. Let them initiate the conversation,
But that must be hard as a firing offense. I mean, can that be one of your 3 instances, just that? Or do you have to have a real rule infraction?
You have to,
because being a doorman, there's so many subtleties.
Right.
Of how to
that
do
is
it.
not a fireable offense. You have to.
Right.
It's got to be a technical one, like coming to work late repeatedly, stuff like that.
His dog took a crap on the lobby floor.
Fireable offense right there. Exactly. Like, what was my dog doing on the premises? Right.
That was funny. Your memoir. So how did that come about happening? And while you're answering that, before you knew you'd be writing a memoir, you were working as a doorman. Were you taking notes just because you were a writer? Or did you later, when you decided to write the memoir, this is all from memory recall, because you have such good stories that with great dialogue and details.
Thanks.
So how did that?
So no, I didn't start. I had, by 2015, when I decided to start writing the memoir, I had already worked as a doorman. 11 years. I had taken no notes. And what it was that I didn't even expect to go to get a master's in writing. I went to John Jay just to recover the BA. When I had gotten kicked out of 9 college, for me, my mission was, let me get back what I lost then. And that's how I was consoling myself by then. I had gotten kicked out of college, but I was going to make it right by now going to John Jay and getting a BA. But at John Jay, one of my professors, Richard Perez, told me, Stephen, you're the best writer I've ever encountered all my career. You should go to school for writing. I had missed every deadline for the MFAs in New York City, for the writing MFAs. I had missed NYU, Columbia, a whole bunch of others. And I didn't want to leave New York City. He wanted me to go to Iowa or try to. I was not going to go to Iowa. But Hunter was there.
You'd done Minnesota.
Yeah, I was good enough with that. Hunter was there, and I had a month. And I was working on 2 theses at John Jay. And one of them was an honors thesis, and I had no time to give him a 20-page writing sample. So I got them a whole 30 pages worth of Facebook status updates, condensed it into 20 pages, and I got into Hunter on the strength of my Facebook statuses. But that was, for me, kind of like icing on the cake, just getting in.
Right.
I had no plan really. I was just going to go to Hunter, and I guess I might as well get an MFA now. Cool, something to do. First year was the worst year I've ever experienced any academic time in my life. It was horrible. I almost didn't come back for my second year.
Was that because of the fellow students that you write about?
Yeah. Yes.
They weren't very nice to you.
I don't know why. I don't like to use the R word like the way it's used in the culture. Everything is racist. Everything in the culture is racist or racism. So nothing is racist because you don't even take it seriously. But even in my own city, the city that raised me, created me, that I was made to feel like a behemoth, monstrous being. I never said anything. You would have heard about it already. I was just myself. The way I am,
right.
Very authentic human being. The way I'm speaking to you, the way I am with you, is the way I am with the person down the street, with everyone. And yeah, it was. They didn't want to talk to me, and they didn't want to talk to the Jewish lady.
Oh,
yeah, there was a Jewish lady in the class. They didn't want to talk to her either. I mean, they treated her like an ape, and they treated me like an ape. Well, she and I became friends. So yeah, it was the worst. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. But
I wonder if they've read your book.
I don't know. Hunter hasn't reached out to me at all. Everyone else has. I've already visited John Jay 2 times to speak there with students or whatever. And Hunter hasn't reached out at all. I get their emails.
Strange.
It's all right.
I mean, the New Yorker and the New York Times both loved your book, and Hunter hasn't reached out.
No, nothing. So I don't get it. Hunter, what's up?
Well, how about, so, you don't speak, it was clear you didn't love some of those students, but also just in the memoir, there are a lot of doormen and residents. Did you just do fictitious names? How do you get away with it? And you've still got the job at the second building.
Yeah, I've used all pseudonyms. Also, a lot of the residents that pass by, they're either there's one resident that passes literally in the scene. She passes through the elevator into the lobby and out the door. She still lives in the building where I work now, but she, that moment was of no consequence. I changed her name for just to be safe. But then there's Novak, right?
Yeah.
She lives in the building. She doesn't know,
She has a different name.
Oh,
so 100%. She doesn't.
Yeah. And if she wants to say something, go for it. But you actually are quite literally racist. So you'd be outing yourself, And then everybody else that passes by, I forget his name. He's the gentleman who, I forget the pseudonym. So he's the character in Orange Man.
Right. Who showed you his thigh.
Right. The most orange thigh I'd ever seen. He's moved away. Then there's the other gentleman who was always asking me, how's it hanging? He's passed away. So a lot of the residents have either moved.
O'Leary.
Yes. He's moved. They've moved or passed on. So,
okay.
Yeah. The ones of more consequence, that I lean on. The Blooms.
Yeah.
That's also a pseudonym. I still don't know why I had to change their names to such beautiful people. Mrs. Bloom's son was at my book publishing party, and he was telling everyone I almost said their name. He was telling everyone it's not Bloom, it's this, you know?
Yeah, tell us about that. That was a really touching chapter. And that's, you sort of mentioned it earlier when you said you know, were bringing your personal life into work and how the bloom sort of saved you.
Yeah, so this also answers one of your previous questions, which is, do I follow all the rules? The rule of don't get close, I have learned to break by allowing residents essentially to invite me to break it. Because if they say, hey, can you come over for dinner tomorrow night? They invited me. I can say yes, and the rule is broken, but it's not like I'm inviting. There's another one of my coworkers who has invited residents to a picnic at his house. Everyone heard about that, and our boss was like, what are you doing? You know? And they didn't like it. They didn't like the invitation. Anyway, about the blooms, that year was a struggle. It was an absolute struggle. I remember getting ganged up on in class one time because one of my classmates wrote a piece in which one of the teachers in the piece, I was supposed to view him as a sexual predator, but she didn't write him that way at all. There was no characteristics or details. In fact, she showed him repeatedly crying in the scenes. So I felt a sense of, I felt bad for him. I felt sympathy for him. So I brought that to class the next day. Unbeknownst to me, all the ladies in the class had conversations about him being predatory in some way. Right. She didn't write it on the page. So if it wasn't on the page, I can only do my job as a reader and read that he's crying 3 different times. So I remember I got ganged up on as soon as I said, guys, what are you talking about? This guy's a bad man. I don't see it. I felt bad for him. He's a music teacher who's crying. He may be overly sensitive about the music, but you have him crying. They all ganged up. How could you? This is Stephen. You're a terrible person. I was like, what? And that was at the beginning or the middle part of the fall semester. And that just set the tone for the rest of the year. I just felt like the other.
Right.
You know, so I was the only man, the only Hispanic person for the whole year. And I was going to work. So I'd often work, then have class, go home, struggle, go to sleep, then go back to work. It was just like that every single day. Yeah. And every day kind of melted into the next one. And Mrs. Bloom noticed it. And whereas we had been having a dialogue for days, for years, when I was at John Jay, and John Jay, forget about it. I was a rock star at John Jay every day. Right. You know, and I'm bringing great news to her every single day. Like, Mrs. Bloom, you won't believe this. You know, the professor's putting me up for an award. I won this contest and beat all these legal students. Isn't that great? Well, at Hunter, I wasn't giving her none of that. And it was crushing me to not be able to deliver this news for her. Because she had become kind of like a surrogate mother for me, you know? Uh-huh. And it meant a lot to hear that she was impressed. I didn't have that with my family, but I got that from her. And I just got really dark and morose, and she picked up on it, and she felt she had to do something about it. And then the one day she just said, what are you doing next week on this day? And I said, well, I have class, but then I'm free. She said, we'd like to have you over for dinner. So come right after class. And I did. And I remember I walked. It was just 10 block walk, 5 minutes. And they showed me a documentary on August Wilson. And here's this ethnic fellow who's, not that his ethnicity matters so much, but I saw myself in him because he's black, but he's light-skinned. So I'm light-skinned compared to him too, you know? And he's just walking around smoking cigarettes with his news cap and in Pittsburgh. And he's repping Pittsburgh in all his writing. He's an artist. He's successful, but he doesn't treat himself like anything more than a Pittsburgh working class guy, you know? And I don't smoke, but there was something about seeing him smoke cigarettes repeatedly in the scenes that just let me know that he was very comfortable in his own skin, and he didn't give a good damn what anybody thought about him, how he sounded or what he wrote or anything like that, you know? And it really inspired me, really motivated me, it strengthened me, it made me feel enabled. And it was just Stephen, it just told me, Stephen, just be yourself. Who gives a shit what they think?
And the fact that they knew this was the documentary
Yeah.
that you needed to see.
Yes.
It's touching.
I mean, you got to give them all the credit in the world, because all she did was really invite me to meet August Wilson.
Right.
There were no speeches given. Mr. Bloom had the sandwiches and the Amstel lights, and he just watched. It was like it was like they knew what would happen.
Yeah.
You know, and it was wonderful and beautiful on their part, and it just changed the trajectory of my time at the MFA.
Maybe this is related, because in your acknowledgments, you thank a teacher and you say, I think it was a teacher that said, write yourself into existence.
Perez, yeah.
Was that also at Hunter? Or because it seems very similar.
He had told me that previously, but during that first year, I consulted with him and also Allison Pease at John Jay, who said, fuck beauty, you know.
Oh, right. What did that mean, fuck beauty?
Well,
I saw that.
Excuse me. They would often write in the margins of our, to themselves and rarely to me, in their pieces. We would workshop each other's pieces. Right. And they would often write just beautiful, beautiful in the margins, beautiful, beautiful. And I'd see everyone's pages marked beautiful. Like one classmate would write beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And my pages rarely got the word beautiful in the margins. And the way they treated me every single day, very little eye contact. The one girl would just kind of like stare at me unblinkingly while I spoke, like I was a monster, and she couldn't believe that I could speak, you know? And I was made to feel like I was incapable of writing beautiful work, and that I wasn't myself a beautiful human being, whereas they were. You know, and I don't mean it looks, you know what I mean? Like they're holding themselves up on pedestals, and I didn't have even a baby pedestal because I wasn't as beautiful as they were, you know? And my classmates aren't the ones writing the A on my record, but you do feel a sense of duty to please and entertain your classmates. And they had let me know, no, you are not writing beautiful work. And she said, fuck beauty. You know, this is an Oxford educated. She's now the provost at John Jay. One of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. She was like, fuck beauty. Just write. Just do what you do. You're different. Write the way. And she got me back actually to a core lesson in writing in writing memoir, which is also, after reading a lot of memoirs, I realized some authors don't take advantage of this, but you're taught to write the way you speak. And in the classroom, one of the reasons I think they didn't like me was because I sounded different. I sound like a New Yorker, and none of them were New Yorkers. I think there were only 2 native New Yorkers in the class, aside from me. Everyone else had traveled and gotten into the program from elsewhere in the country and moved to New York City for the program. And
there were only 6 people, right, in the program, in your class?
No, well, 6. It was 6 first year and 6 second year, so there was 12.
Small.
Yes. So I was the only male New Yorker in the class. So that comes with a certain accent, especially when you're feeling free and you're having fun. I mean, I sound a certain way. And I go to great lengths in the book to let that kind of play.
You succeed.
Thank you.
You succeed. And in the audible that you narrate also.
Right. I realized I have a singular voice on the page. You don't get, you get a lot of writers, you have a lot of writers living in your city, but rarely do you encounter any that actually are from there. And rarer still is the Latin native New Yorker on the page. So when I realized that I had that market corner, I was like, wait a second, just Stephen too, just relax, fuck them, first of all, and just do what you do. Get on the page, have fun. And that's what I decided to do the second year.
Fantastic. So, I mean, yeah, you definitely have a really strong voice. One of the things I loved was also the 3 subjects that you can talk about as a doorman, the 3 accepted subjects. And so can you tell us about those? And I'm just wondering, did you weave into those 3 accepted subjects? Did you talk to the doorman about your writing or not really? Did you kind of keep it a secret? It was like ass and...
Okay, right. So it's Puerto Rico women, and what was the other? Oh, Yankees, baseball.
The Yankees.
What did I call it?
Oh, yeah, I wrote it down. What was it? Wait, baseball women and Puerto Rico.
Baseball
It
women.
was so not ass, but that's kind of what you meant.
Big asses, women, and baseball. Yeah. What was your question again?
Did you kind of weave in that you were doing this whole writing thing and you're writing the book, or did you kind of just keep it to yourself? Were they interested or not really?
I did not tell anyone in the building anything until the 11th hour. Maybe I think
probably smart actually, because it might change the way they. Yeah.
Also, I mean, I feel like everyone's writing a book. Everyone's writing. I didn't tell people in my neighborhood or even in my life that I told them I was just going to school for writing, and that's it. But I rarely ever spoke or told people that I was writing a book, even after I got a book deal, you know? So at the job, you know, we're just doormen. We view each other as doormen. I'm over here going to say 2 years in advance, HarperCollins is going to put my book on bookshelves everywhere. No, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do it until I saw it.
Yeah.
So 1 month beforehand, I told the super at the building, I told them, hey, you know, just to let you know, this thing is happening. Remember that book I mentioned that I got a book deal? Well, it's actually materializing into a book, and you're in the book. You know? And then I had a few residents that were friends also. The Blooms, you know. I'm actually going to see her in San Francisco in 2 weeks. Mr. Bloom has passed away. Unfortunately, I was working really hard to try to get this in his hands, you know, because I saw him ailing physically.
Right.
Mrs. Bloom, I'm going to see her in San Francisco in 2 weeks. But I did not make a big deal out of it at all until the last minute.
So what's the reaction been now that they've read the book?
Yeah, I feel like they're proud of me, and it makes me feel so great because there were two doormen in the book, Sammy and Frank, who I don't frame them in a particularly positive light. Sammy was the one who stole the overtime for me. But and he actually had left and then came back to work at the building. And we are now great coworkers. We get along.
Oh, great.
So then the book is the publishing date is approaching. I'm like, oh my gosh, if he gets his hands on this book and he reads this is going to set us back. And I actually like the guy, you know, we get along great. We work together Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I actually met up with him for drinks in Queens where he lives. And I told him, Sammy, this is coming. And I wrote the truth. You know what happened 10 years ago. I'm over it. You know, can we move on? He said, yeah, man, don't worry about it. Just get me a free book.
Oh, good.
Just get me a free book and sign it. You know, so I did. Actually, he purchased the book, but I think I gave him an extra one for his girlfriend. Something like that. But that was what it was. I saw him purchasing the book. He bought it in front of me on Amazon.
Whoops.
And I said, okay, we're going to have a talk. That was to start the shift. Yeah, I remember that.
What about your parents?
My mother's very, very proud. She is very proud. She flew up from Florida for my publishing day. She spent a few days here, also went to my first reading. She's so, so proud. You saw how I wrote my mother. This incredible woman in my life. My father is not talking to me at the moment because he read the book jacket, right? And I didn't write the descriptive type, the descriptive type, on the book jacket. My editor called him an oppressively religious father wreaking havoc on my life. That was actually longer. It was like 2 lines longer where she went in on my father. And I was like, hey, can we cut that down a little bit? Because, you know, the book wasn't written. It's not about me or my father. My father, he plays a role, played a huge role in my life. But I did my best to kind of, first of all, I'm not angry at him anymore. So it's truth. The truth is I didn't want.
You say that.
Right. I'm not angry. I didn't want to bash him in the book. I wrote some of the truth. I didn't go into it further because the book is not about he and I. It's not about me and him at all. It's about me. So I also advocate for him in the book. My father was treated poorly by his godmother growing up. He didn't have either parent. And the fact that
you wrote that, it was harrowing what he went through.
Right. Yeah. So the fact that he was able to provide for a family of 9 and not project what was going on in his own mind 100% on us, I think it is something to give him credit for. Now, as an adult, that's how I view it. He was emotionally absent, and he was often abusive with his words. And I hope to improve on that when I have kids, But my father did still provide. He showed me what it was to work really, really hard. He didn't refuse to be on we were on welfare, I remember 1 month. And then that was it. I remember him telling my mother, do the paperwork, get us off that. I'm gonna work harder. And
wow.
He was a great, great worker and provider. And he would just put his head down.
Is he still very religious or no?
I think he would say he is. Yeah. But when you're going to church and you're believing some of these things, you hope that others might say, hey, I've seen a change, in this person's life. They're making different decisions. They're behaving differently. And I wish one of the things I would like to see change is our relationship. He's not talking to me. My father, and he hasn't read the book, or else I think he would talk to me, because I'm the only person that has reached this big a platform in his life, and I advocate for him and I stand up for him. Where he was a child back then, and no one did,
Right.
And his eldest son did in the book,
and you got him a job. I read in another article, a doorman job.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I don't, I'm not.
Oh, I hope he starts speaking to you soon.
Right. Me too. I love my dad. I do. I want the best for him, and I'm his son. He's my father, and I like to get along with my father.
Good. I love this quote too. Towards the end of the book, you write, "You're a doorman, a man who opens doors. You're a fish meant to stay the size of your tank." Do you feel that you stayed the size of your tank?
No. I have definitely. It's weird. I have jumped out of the tank, and now it's just a job. It's a good job. So until I find the place where I belong, the space that where I'm challenged repeatedly, like maybe a professor job, or something like that. I'll continue to do it, and I'll be big fish in this small tank. But it's I'm not going to complain. Like, I'm getting paid well. I got a great co-workers. The residents at the building are wonderful, and they're also proud of me. I think you asked me also. I didn't answer that part of your question. You asked me how the residents responding. Most of them, 90%, have heard the New York Times article. They all caught on to that because they all read the Times. And they're all really proud. They say, "Hey, great article. I'm going to buy your book." Some of them didn't even know. I haven't been, I see residents. I haven't been telling them, "Hey, I published a book. You can find it at Barnes and Noble." I haven't been telling them. If they find out about it, great. But the New York Times was what kind of alerted them, a lot of them, to the book.
Yeah,
so they're very proud. But I work. A lot of good jobs are hard to come by in the current economy, and I have a really good one. And I also published a piece of artwork, piece of literature. And so I feel very lucky. But until I have something, a bigger tank where I feel like I'm
right
intellectually, I know it'll come.
You're happy.
Until then.
So
go ahead.
You're content.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you're a busy guy. You have a lot going on. You're not at school anymore. So when are you going to squeeze in the writing? I guess when you're doing the night shift. Or if you do the night shift
anymore.
I'm not on the night
shift. I would have to return to it. I am going to, I'm going to figure it out, even if I have to cut out the salsa, because that's Thursdays and Sundays. And those are good nights for writing,
Oh, right.
So I also take salsa classes for myself. That's Wednesdays.
Oh, wow.
Wednesdays and Thursdays sometimes. So,
good for you.
Thank you. Salsa is this just incredibly wonderful craft that I learn to love and enjoy. It's part of my culture too. So it's like I'm getting closer to my culture in a way. But the book and literature is going to take, it's going to be first. It's going to be priority. So I'll do whatever it takes.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
And again, this is really just a great book.
Thank you so much.
And it was such a joy to read it and also to listen to it. It's just like I've said, and why I do this podcast, I love it when I'm into a good book. And it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes I read a book and I'm just like, no. And this one was like right away. So
Thank you so much.
You are a great writer. So good luck. And I hope you get that professorship. And I can't wait to read the next one.
Thank you, Elena.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Stephen is a super talented writer, and his book isn't like any other memoir I've ever read. He writes just like he speaks. He's authentic, warm, and doesn't miss a beat. Very observant, with an ear for dialogue. I live in a doorman building, not on Park Avenue, but close. And Stephen's book has made me think more about the doorman in my building. I wonder what they say about me. Hopefully not that I'm a heavy hitter. You don't want to be a heavy hitter. Hopefully, I'm one of their favorite residents. That would be nice. I love this upstairs-downstairs peek on Park Avenue life, told by an ace storyteller. Please follow me on Instagram at Elena Meets the Author, where you can send me book ideas or authors you'd like to see on the show. Thanks again for listening.